Oh, hello YouTube. On this episode of Drunk Classics, we're going to be reading Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I have to say it like that, it needs drama. But anyway, I'm just having a me day. I'm having like a comfy day. Like I haven't put on pants, it's just sweatpants, no makeup, messy bun, being a bump on the couch all day, which sounds like it's a problem, but it's not. Like, it's what I needed just to relax for a day. So without further ado, I am going to start reading this. I'll read at least a little bit of it. It's really short. I think it's like 200 pages. I'll read some amount of it today, and we'll check in after I've read part 1, because there's 3 parts. Okay. So here's the thing. I am drinking this wine that is very drinkable because it doesn't taste alcoholic very much. So like, I've only read like 60 pages of the book, but like I've drank a lot of wine. So, Murder on the Orient Express. It gets to the murder part rather quickly. So things start off with this guy. His name is Poirot, and he is a little man with an enormous mustache, and he's also a detective. And he's getting on a train in Syria, and he's like going on vacation. He's like, oh, I just want to relax. I just solved a case. I'm gonna take some me time, like I had today. He gets off the train and he gets to his hotel and he's like, all right, vacation time. And he gets this like telegram saying, oh shit, there's a case in London. You need to get there ASAP. And he's like, damn it. So he has to go get on a train. Wouldn't you know, he runs into his friend Book, who is like, he's like this guy who owns trains. I don't know, he's a guy who owns stuff. And like, he's like, sup, Poirot? They're like old bros. And he's just like, oh, you need to get on a train? Take my train. Take the Orient Express. It's a good train. And apparently, like, somehow it got sold out. And he's like, what? In winter? No one takes the train in winter. But apparently it's all sold out. And Book's like, no. Like, he's my bestie. Like, get him on the train. Like, is anyone not here yet? And he's like, well, there's this one guy who hasn't shown up. And he's just like, okay, fuck that guy. Poirot gets his train seat. So Poirot gets on the train and he's like, thanks, buddy. And he's on the train and he's just sitting there getting relaxed. And he plays this game all the time called Judgmental Bastard. Not that he's being a bastard, but that's the game. So he's just like sitting there looking at everybody, judging them, doing that kind of stuff. And he sees this guy. He had seen this guy earlier and now he's on the same train with him, Mr. Ratchet. And he's just like, Mr. Ratchet has serious bad guy face. And he gives him the creeps. He is not dealing with Mr. Ratchet. No. Anyway, so Mr. Ratchet, he ends up coming up to Poirot because of course. And he's like, hey, I know you're Poirot and you're like this detective guy. I got a case for you. Like, someone is trying to kill me. And Poirot is like, you know, like, I'm not interested in that case. Like, I'm good. And Ratchet tries to keep him more and more money to take the case. And he's just like, listen, I don't care how much money you give me. I don't want the case because I don't like your face. Like, I am not even being facetious when I say that. That is a direct quote. He literally says, I don't like your face, and he leaves. Mic drop. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's catty and I love it. So later on that night, Poirot, he's trying to sleep. He's just like, I'm a sleepy detective. And it's late at night and there's all this commotion he keeps hearing. Like, there's this lady, Mrs. Hubbard, and she's like a Karen, so she's like complaining about everything and like talking about foreigners and like just being the worst. And she's like going, there's a man in my room, like just having a shit fit. And the conductor's like, lady, there's no man in your room. I can see in your room. I don't see a dude in there. What are you talking about? So whatever, they're dealing with that. It's really loud, that commotion and whatever. And also, like, they make mention that Poirot, he sticks his head out and he sees someone in a red kimono running away. So there's like a red kimono person, Miss Hubbard throwing a fit. There's just like lots of little commotions all over the place, you know? And on top of all of that commotion, the train is snowed in because it's winter time. And so the tracks, I guess, are too covered in snow. The train is stopped. So now they're stuck. So whatever, Poirot, he's like, I'm going back to bed. And it cut to the next morning. Everybody's awake. No one's having a good time. You know, Miss Hubbard's being a Karen again, going, why can't we move? Blah, I hate snow, blah, you know, just being crazy. And everyone's upset that the train has stopped, you know, for reasons. Like, I don't want to be stuck in a train with the snow. Like, I got places to go. Like, I get their, like, grief here. But, you know, everyone's having a very grumpy breakfast. And Poirot starts talking to this lady. Her name is Mary Debenham. And they bring her up, like, very purposefully. So I feel like she's going to have something in the story. But, like, she is obviously written as a woman with dark secrets. Like, just how she's described and how she, like, takes dramatic pauses. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're, like, oozing dark secrets already. So Book, right? He summons Poirot to his train car. And he's like, bro, listen, like, this guy on the train got super murdered last night, like stabbed all over, just super stabbed a bunch, like 15 times. He's super murdered. You need to figure out who did it, because guess what? We're stuck on a train. And you know what? When you're stuck on a train, there's a limited amount of suspects, so the murderer's on the train with us, and I'm having anxiety. Poirot, you know, he asks, hey, well, who got murdered? And he's like, oh, it's that guy Ratchet. And like, everybody's a little bit like, like, do we care Ratchet got murdered? Like, everyone thinks he's got bad guy face. Everyone's like, well, are you sure he didn't deserve it? Like, everyone's like, no one's really unhappy that he's dead. Poirot ends up taking the case, and he takes it mainly just because he's like, well, the train's not moving anywhere, so I'm bored. I guess I'll go play Judgmental Bastard some more and figure out who killed him. Just out of boredom, he's taking, like, this murder trial case, you know? He's just like, oh, I don't care. Whatever, I'm bored. Let's solve a murder. Poirot, right? He starts interviewing all the people on the train, like, one by one. And he starts with McQueen, who was Ratchet's, like, assistant. And he's like, hey, so your boss is dead? Like, can you illuminate any reasons why someone might have killed him? And he's really not all that helpful. He's just like, oh, he's dead? Like, oh no, what a tragedy. So he's not too fond of his boss either. But he does tell Poirot that Ratchet had been receiving, like, threatening letters lately. Like, a couple weeks ago, he got his first, like, threatening letter, and he saved him because he's his secretary. So he brings him over to Poirot, and he's like, hey, here's these, like, crazy letters someone's threatening to kill him in. Poirot, he goes to Ratchet's, like, cabin, and he's like, okay, let's look around for clues. And there's all these, like, really, like, blatantly obvious clues that are, like, obviously red herrings. And Poirot is like, whoever did this is just stupid. Like, obviously these are planted evidence. There's, like, this, like, handkerchief, a lady's handkerchief with, like, a letter H embroidered on it. There's, like, a man's pipe cleaner, the windows left open, like, all these, like, clues that obviously go nowhere. And was like, okay, he's like, I get these are clues and I'll, like, collect them, but, like, these are also bullshit. So they're, like, investigating the body too, because there was a doctor on the train, and they're going over all the wounds. And the wounds are all super inconsistent too. Like, some of them obviously came from a right-handed person, some of them obviously came from a left-handed person, and also, like, some of them are, like, really, like, murdery strong strikes of a knife, and then some of them are, like, more feeble, like maybe someone with less strength was stabbing. So it's all really inconsistent. There's other clues here too that are maybe more hidden. For example, like, they sniff his glass he drank right before bed, like his drink, and it was obviously poisoned. So they're like, okay, so, like, he got poisoned and stabbed, like, 15 times. Like, someone really wanted this guy dead. And also they find this little, like ashtray. There's, like, a piece of paper in it. And Poirot, he picks it up and he reads it. And it says, like, remember Daisy Armstrong. And Poirot was like, oh, shit. I know what this is about. This guy isn't, his name isn't Ratchet. His name is Cassetti. Because in America, there was this big old crime. Like, everybody reported on this thing where there was the Armstrongs, right? And they were, like, nice and stuff, and they had all this money and whatever. I forget the whole family history, but, like, they had this little baby, and someone kidnapped the baby and, like, killed it. So it's a bad case, and it was this guy Cassetti who did it. So, like, they figured out Ratchet is Cassetti and he's a baby murderer. No one is unhappy that he's dead. Like, the only person who's slightly upset is, like, Book, but mainly just because it happened on his train. He's like, well, like, who cares? Like, fuck this guy, I'm glad he's dead, but, like, did it need to happen on my train? Like, this is a headache. So, no one's upset that he's dead, but they still need to find the killer, and that's kind of where part 1 ends. It just starts with, like, laying out the crime and, like, mystery elements. On that note, this is the last of that bottle of wine. I'm just gonna drink this, and I'm just gonna, like, have more me time for tonight. And then, like, tomorrow, I think I'm gonna read parts 2 and part 3. I'm having me time today. But at least I read some of the book, you know? Like, I accomplished something today besides being a bump on the couch. So, I think I'm winning in life. Hello. It is day 2 of Murder on the Orient Express. And, you know, I had plans of getting my shit together today and, like, doing more stuff, putting makeup on, like, getting off the couch. And, you know, like, I didn't do any of those things. I was just trying to get something accomplished. So, like, I did a little exercise. I gave myself a manicure, like a minty green one. What? Oh, you know, it's been a bit of a me time day again. And, you know, I'm trying not to feel guilty about not doing stuff, because sometimes it's just okay to not do stuff, you know? But anyway, I have part 2 ahead of me in this book, and it's all of the evidence. Like, every chapter is like this person's evidence and that person's evidence. So I'm gonna get into a lot of evidence right now. Let's go. Okay. I read a bunch. I'm like, I don't know, like a little over 70% all the way through this book. So, like, I'm making good progress. So all of part 2 is just kind of about evidence. Like, he's just picking up evidence. So Poirot, he's like, hey, I'm gonna interview everybody on the train, and that's what he's doing. Like, he interviews the conductor. He interviews McQueen, who was Ratchet's, like, secretary. He emails. He interviews Masterson, which was like his valet, and then like Miss Hubbard. Oh my gosh, she is in full Karen mode. She's like, I need to speak to a manager, and I need to speak to one now. She's like, there was a guy in my room. All y'all bitches don't believe me, but there was a guy in my room. And also, like, I heard a woman speaking next door, and I was like, well, Ratchet's that kind of guy anyway. Of course, he'd have a lady in his compartment because she's real judgmental. And she's like, yeah, so I heard a lady over there. And also, look, there was a button. I found a button in my room. It's not one of my buttons. It has to be from this guy who was in my room. And here's this button. And it turns out the button, it's like, it comes off of, like a uniform of someone who works on the train. It's one of the train's uniform button things. So everyone's like, okay, well, maybe this is a clue then. Let's like calm down the Karen. However, coincidence here that's maybe odd is that the princess was godmother to little Daisy Armstrong's mom. So she has a solid connection to the Armstrongs, and she just happens to be on the same train as Ratchet, aka Cassetti, the baby murderer. So, like, somehow they just happen to be on the same train. That seems suspicious, in my opinion. But I don't know, she's also incredibly old, so I don't really think she's one for, like, brutal murder, because I don't really think she's, like, physically capable of doing it. So who knows? So the interviews continue, and he talks to this English colonel, and he's the only guy on the train that smokes a pipe. And in Ratchet's room, they found a pipe cleaner. So they're like, okay, so this guy is the only guy on the train with a pipe cleaner. Maybe these clues are connected. And they start interviewing this guy, Hardman. And he's a salesman, but not really. He's secretly a private detective. Now there's 2 detectives on this train. It's full of princesses and detectives. What's happening? Hardman, he's a private detective. And Ratchet had kind of, like, hired him to, like, be a lookout. Like, say, like, hey, guess what? Someone's trying to murder me. It's a small, dark man with a womanly voice. Like, that's who's trying to murder me. If you see this guy, you gotta stop him from murdering me. And he's like, okay. So, like, he's kind of, like, on the Cassetti Ratchet case a little bit. But, so now they have a lead because they're like, okay, a small dark man with a womanly voice is like who they're looking for. This is like murder suspect numero uno. And so they like interview a bunch of other people and they're all like, it's just stupid. There's no point in like, even discussing them. And then they get to Mary Debenham, a woman with dark secrets. She's just so written like so mysteriously. And Poirot, he's just like, she's a mystery. And she's also smart and capable of scheming. So maybe she's a suspect. I don't know. Poirot seems to think Mary Debenham knows more than she's saying / crafty. So she's kind of a suspect at this point. And then they finally talk to Miss Schmidt, who's like this German maid, I think for the princess. And she's like, hey, guess what? I bumped into somebody last night in a conductor's uniform and it was a small dark man with a lady voice. So like, oh, they're getting corroborating evidence about this small dark man with a lady voice wearing a conductor's uniform and they have a button missing. So like things are coming together. There's pieces. Poirot is trying to figure out the facts of this case. So he's like, here's some facts. 1, I think that Hardman, the private detective, was actually hired by Ratchet. That makes sense. He tried to hire me. He's into hired detectives. I believe that. That's a fact. 2, there was somebody dressed as a conductor on this train and they lost a button. Someone dressed as a conductor lost the button. That's also a fact. Also, there is some type of small dark man with a womanly voice. And does this person exist? Or perhaps it's just a woman dressed in men's clothing? I don't know. There's like vague things here. So like there's some type of small dark person with a soft voice, essentially. There's a person matching this description somewhere. So on that note, he's like, okay, let's start searching luggage. Let's start searching everybody's luggage. Let's look for clues. And guess what? I have predictions because I am a master detective. I am Hercule Poirot. First of all, that like scarlet kimono, we're gonna find it in a man's luggage. Just saying. And 2, he's gonna find the conductor's uniform in Miss Schmidt's bag. He's like, it's gonna be in her bag. Like, it's going to be in her bag. I will take no other answers. It's just gonna be there. And if it isn't there, it means she's innocent. And for reasons, he doesn't really explain this reasoning, but, you know, spoiler alert, guys, he's totally right. They do end up finding, like, the conductor's uniform with the missing button in Miss Schmidt's bag, and she's like, I've never seen this before! And so they're like, okay, calm down, lady, calm down. It's okay, calm down, like, think about cupcakes or something. Like, I don't know, they're trying to make her calm. Also, I forgot they found the murder weapon too. Miss Hubbard, the Karen, she's like, like throwing a Karen fit because she's like, there was a knife in my bag. So she opens one of her bags and there was a big old bloody knife in it. She's like, oh, and she will not shut up about it. She's like, there was a bloody knife in my bag and I did not put it there. And now I have a bloody knife bag and I'm not living for this. So now they have a murder weapon. They have found the conductor's uniform, and then that's it. And so, you know, they've kind of conducted all the search and investigations they can. They interviewed everybody. They went through all the baggage. They have all of the clues they're going to find. It's up to, you know, Poirot to, like, use his master detective brain and, like, piece it all together. So he's like, all right, I need to go have a think about things. I'm going to go back to my cabin. I'm going to grab some cigarettes, and I'm going to have a think. So he goes back to his cabin, right? And he opens up his luggage to grab the cigarettes. And you know what he finds in his luggage? A scarlet kimono! Dun dun dun! So someone stuck the kimono in his bag and he's just like, oh bitch, you wanna play? Like, I'm gonna detective the shit out of you. Woo! And that's where part 2 ends. Poirot, he has all the evidence he can get. And the red kimono was in his bag. So he's like, oh, someone's trying to fuck with me? Okay, not cool, bro. I'm gonna fuck with you back. And then we're gonna go into part 3, where Poirot, he needs to do a lot of thinking. He's gotta put on his thinking cap and figure out who did this, because he's got questions and only few answers. So you know, we were at the pivotal point, and I'm gonna stop for tonight too, because like I'm dragging out the mystery, but it's okay, because this has been a me time weekend. You know, like sometimes you just need a weekend where you don't do nothing. You just be a bump on the couch, and you take care of yourself, and you just relax, and you give yourself minty manicures. Hello, YouTube. This is day 3 of Murder on the Orient Express. Mind you, could I have read this all in one day? Yeah, probably. However, I've been having me time days and I've been enjoying it. I'm pre-gaming this a little bit because I only have part 3 left of Murder on the Orient Express. Let's go. I want to see who killed this guy, because he's like a baby murderer and no one cares he's dead, but we gotta figure out who did it, I guess. Hi. I have finished my wine, and I have finished Murder on the Orient Express. Part 3, right? The big conclusion. Basically, Poirot, he's having a big think about things. He's like, okay, I got all this evidence. They said all this. I've interviewed everybody and what they said. And then I have like the physical evidence. Blah-de-blah-de-blah. He's also got a bunch of questions that he needs answered. All these loose ends. He's like, if I can answer these questions, it'll narrow down my suspect pool. So he starts going into all these like real obscure little facts that people may have not picked up on. One of them I said I did pick up on. I got one of them because like in Ratchet's compartment, like someone spoke in French to the conductor, and they made a big deal out of saying how Ratchet doesn't speak French. So it was like, that's something. And so does Poirot. He's like, hey, he didn't speak French. The guy's a dummy. And like, he didn't speak French, so someone spoke French, but it wasn't him. And he starts playing judgmental bastard again. And he starts talking about the passengers. And he's just like, I'm just gonna throw out some stuff and see if it sticks. So first things first, he talks to the Count and the Countess again, you know, because they didn't really have much to say the first time. He figures one thing out, because he saw her passport and there was like a little grease stain on it. And he's just like, listen. Her name says Elena, right? With an E. But what if it was like Helena with an H, and like someone tried to like obscure the details? And that means that handkerchief is probably hers. Like, oh, and like basically I feel like everyone's being a hype man at this point. They're like, oh shit, Poirot! And he's just like, oh yeah, that handkerchief is hers? I'm gonna take it up a notch. Guess what? I'm betting this lady's like maiden name was Goldenberg, aka the same last name as Mrs. Armstrong. She's probably her little sister. Oh! And then like, you know, Book and the doctor are like, oh! So they're all just like being a hype crew, and I'm like kind of into it. So Poirot says that to them basically, and he's like, hey, like this is it, right? And they're like, well, you got us, like, you know, but like more defensive than that. But like basically they're like, yeah, like why even try to pretend like you're wrong? Like obviously you have enough facts to know you're right. But like the Count, he was just like, listen, my wife is fucking innocent. She's completely innocent. I will throw down with you. Like, she is innocent. I altered her passport just to protect her, because as soon as you said you had an H handkerchief, I knew you were gonna start throwing blame this way, and she didn't do it. You can go fuck yourself. Like, he's like really uppity about it. And I was like, all right, yeah, you stand by your lady. I like him. But when they're interviewing the Count and the Countess, you know, she's like Mrs. Armstrong's younger sister, and she starts like laying out a bunch of names, and I'm like, this seems conspicuous. So she starts saying like who's everyone was in the house. There's like a maid and a companion lady, like a lady's maid, and then like a cook and stuff. They have all these other people in the house, and she starts saying names, and I was like, oh shit. But that's it. Like, he's like, all right, you could go, whatever. It's not like they're gonna go anywhere. The train is snowed in, so he's like, you could go, bye. And then, you know who shows up afterward? The Princess Dragomirov, who was besties with Mrs. Armstrong's mom, Linda Arden, who was like a famous actress. So like, she shows up and she's like, hey, listen, I'm Russian AF, and like H, the letter H is actually an N in Russian. Like, my handkerchief is in Russian. Yeah, my name's Natasha. It's my handkerchief. And so he's like, well, how to get with the dead guy? And she's like, fuck if I know, bro. You figure it out. So we figured out who owned the handkerchief. This was his clue. They had a handkerchief, like a fancy one with the letter H on it. It was found in the dead guy's room. So that was like the clue. And now they know it belongs to this very elderly princess. So like they're like, I'm pretty sure she didn't overpower this guy. Like, you know? So still, he's getting facts together about who these people actually are, but like still no like clear killer. And then it just starts snowballing from here, where he's just figuring it all out. And he's just like, hey, remember how like the murder, he had all these stabs, and some of them were left-handed and some were right-handed and some were like more shallow than others, and it was like a whole mishmash of stabs. He's like, you know who's left-handed? The Count. And Boog's like, oh shit! You know, that he's still being a hype man. So like they have a left-handed person, and there was the Count, and they're like, okay, so he's trying to figure things out. And it goes so far as this. He starts interviewing this colonel, right? And he's just like, hey, listen, like, you know Mary Debenham, Miss Debenham? You seem close, yeah. By the way, like, are you aware she was, like, you know, the governess to the Armstrongs? Because she totally was. And he's just like... So he's unhappy that he figured that out. So, okay, so Debenham, the princess, the Count and Countess, like, they all have a connection to the Armstrong murder. Like, originally they already knew about the princess. They already knew that. And now more people are in on it. So he's like, oh shit, like everybody seems to have like a connection. And then you have the Swedish maid who was on the train, and she was actually a nurse to the Armstrong's baby. And then you have Masterman, who was like Ratchet's valet, and he was just like, yeah, so during the war I was actually Mr. Armstrong's Batman. So like, oh my gosh, they're all connected to the Armstrongs. There's like 12 passengers on this train, and he's up to 9 people with a definite connection to the Armstrongs. Oh shit. We get to the big finale, and Poirot, he's like, hey, round everybody up. I got it. So he's like, hey, listen, there's 2 solutions for this case. I'm gonna lay them out. Here you go. Number 1. It's exactly what all the evidence says, and this was an outside job. When we stopped at this other city for like a little bit, people got off the train and on the train and stuff, and they left the door open. Some guy, you know, that you would say Ratchet was scared of, a small dark man with a womanish voice, hopped on the train, killed him, left at this one station. So like that's like the thing they're thinking. That's option 1. Or option number 2, all y'all motherfuckers did it. And then he starts laying it out how actually things happen. He's just like, oh yeah, McQueen, you know, his like Ratchet's secretary, you obviously burnt the letter and you didn't do a good job because it left the little Armstrong name. You fucked up, buddy. Also, Masterman, you know, the valet, you obviously must have drugged him because you were in charge of giving him drinks and stuff. So like you drugged him, so he wasn't fighting back, he was all drugged up. And then like Miss Hubbard, she obviously was lying about some guy being in her compartment because there was no way that could have happened. There was like a whole thing with like how the door is positioned with the locks and stuff that I'm not even gonna get into. But anyway, he just like, you're lady, you full of shit. And also how convenient, Miss Hubbard's room obviously connected to Ratchet's, as she keeps telling everybody. So all y'all motherfuckers went in through Hubbard's room, went into his room, and just stabbed him. Everybody took a turn stabbing this guy. Y'all are stabby. So now that he's laid it out, and he's just like, listen, this is what the facts have told me, because like I had to think, like, if there's like this guy got stabbed a bunch, like who didn't stab him, basically. He's like, I gotta work backwards and figure out who didn't stab him rather than figuring out who did stab him. So now they got 11 stabs and they have one more stab. Who did it? Who else was on the train? And he's just like, he twirls his mustache probably. It was the conductor. Remember the conductor? He's on that train too. And he's French. And this lady in the case was French. She was like the maid, and the police were trying to make it into that like she was in on the kidnapping and she wasn't, and she was scared and they were gonna like, I don't know, they were gonna just like ruin her life, and she ended up killing herself. So this French lady, right? And he's just like, hey Michelle, that French lady, probably the right age to be your daughter. So Michelle was like the conductor. So the conductor's daughter killed herself in regard to the case. So that leaves like Masterman, the American detective guy, right? And he's just like, Remember how I talked about how foreign girls are dope and you were like, yeah, I bet that French girl is your girlfriend. So like they're all connected to the Armstrongs in some way. However, they haven't got to Mrs. Hubbard yet. The Karen. What's she doing? How is she connected? She obviously was cool with everyone going in and stabbing. And he's just like, you know what? Mrs. Armstrong's mother, Linda Arden, was a very famous actress. And, you know, Hubbard, you've been really laying it on thick. So Mrs. Hubbard is actually Linda Arden. And she was the Mrs. Armstrong's mother. And she's like, what up, Poirot? You got me, okay? You figured it out. Good for you. But guess what? I'd stab the motherfucker again. I don't care. You know what? Leave everyone out of this. I will take all of the blame. Tell the police I stabbed him all of the times. Like, I would do it again. He deserved it. This wasn't the first baby he murdered. Apparently, he just murders babies a lot. And she's like, listen, he's a baby murderer. I don't care he's dead. I don't think anyone else cares he's dead, but I'll take the blame. Fuck it. At this point, Poirot, he's like, hey, Book, it's your train, buddy. Like, what do you think happened? Which solution is correct? And after hearing, you know, about all the baby murdering, he's just like, I'm gonna go with number one. Number one's correct. It's obviously correct. There's so many clues. It had to have been an outside job. Someone had to have killed this guy from outside my train. It definitely wasn't my train full of murderers. So it's a little covering his own ass, a little bit like, fuck that guy. And so Poirot, he's like, yep, there you go. He says it's number one. I retire from this case. Mic drop. You know, it was a full like, fuck that guy, mic drop. Everyone killed him. It's been found out. Nobody gives a shit. Like, fuck that guy. Stab him again. I hope this made sense. Like, this is Drunk Amanda doing the filming. Sober Amanda's editing this. And I don't know if Sober Amanda's having a good time making anything make sense right now. But there was a lot. Here's the deal. They're on a train. There's this guy who's a baby murderer. And everybody else on the train were, like, in on it because they were all related to a baby he murdered. And so they all stabbed him. There you go. Spoiler alert. Everybody killed this guy. Fuck that guy. I read the whole thing. I read Murder on the Orient Express. I finally did it. And you know what? It's kind of a good whodunit murder mystery, you know? Because, like, there's so many murder mysteries, like, I figure out immediately. Mainly because you're looking for, like, one killer, you know? And by the way, I'm sorry, I'm gonna ruin, like, CSI, any crime procedural show, because it's the second person. 9 times out of 10, it's the second person introduced into the narrative. There you go, that's the killer. And you know what? I write a lot when I pick out the second person introduced into the narrative. And then Agatha came along, she's like, who cares about the second person you met? Everybody killed this guy. So she kind of like subverted the trope. I don't know if he was even a trope in this era when she wrote this yet, but like it is now. So yeah, in the end, it was a good fun murder mystery. I do think the ending probably was wrapped up too quickly. I would have wanted to spend a bit more time dealing with everyone and getting more seedy clues and like figuring out who they were and everything. I would have wanted to spend more time there. But I do get why this is considered, you know, like a murder mystery classic. It's like very much subverts the tropes. You don't expect it to be everybody's the killer. That's a new one. So yeah, I had a good time with it. And I don't know if I'm making any sense anymore. Let me know in the comments down below, what are some of your favorite murder mysteries? Are they Agatha Christie or are they something else? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.